Hello and welcome to the Debrief. I'm back with the Hill's editor-in-chief, Bob Cusack. Happy Thanksgiving, Bob.
Happy Thanksgiving, Robby.
All right, let's get to it. Former President Trump is fuming over the Supreme Court's decision to reject his appeal, which asked them to shield his tax returns from House Democrats. President Trump bucked tradition during his 2016 presidential run when he said he could not release his returns due to an audit. So I read what he had to say, and yeah, that was pretty spicy. He is not happy. He said they ruled against me like they always do, like a kid who's getting picked on by the popular crew.
He is not happy with the Supreme Court. He would not call it supreme, I don't think. But this is interesting because obviously we have a change of power, right? And these records are going to be handed over to House Democrats over the next several weeks, they're in the majority for that short amount of time. What's going to happen now? They can't become public. But are we going to find out what's in them? Somehow I think we will.
You know what? This made me realize that, so he made these statements about the Supreme Court that are pretty incendiary on Truth Social. They're not getting talked about that much because imagine if this was on Twitter. I mean, so The Hill did a very good report on this. But there's not going to be maybe a lot of cable news segments about it. There's not going to be tons and tons of reporting about it because these are things he's saying on Truth Social, not on Twitter. Now, he's allowed to be back on Twitter. Elon Musk says he can be back on Twitter. And I think if he was saying these things on Twitter, they'd be talked about a lot more. So it's showing me how the news coverage of Trump might be different in this election run if he remains off Twitter and on Truth Social.
And maybe that will be his rationale. I don't know about you, but I think it's just a matter of time before he's back on Twitter. I'm not saying it's going to be next week, but he's running for president again. So he can say, well, listen, I want to reach as many people as I can. I like what Musk has done, et cetera, et cetera. But, it's interesting that Trump nominated 3 of the justices, and clearly he's expressed unhappiness with them when he challenged the election results, and now is unhappy with them.
And he said that as well. The Supreme Court has lost its honor, prestige, and standing. It's become nothing more than a political body, and they refuse to even look at the election hoax of 2020. Shame on them. Election not being a hoax, just FYI.
He's still talking about it.
Still talking about it. Well, the Biden administration, meanwhile, has extended the moratorium on student loan repayments again and interest accruals. The pause was set to expire on December 31st. Here's President Biden making that announcement.
But I'm completely confident my plan is legal. But right now, it's on hold because of these lawsuits. We're not going to back down, though, in our fight to give families breathing room. That's why the Department of Justice is asking the Supreme Court of the United States to rule on the case. But it isn't fair to ask tens of millions of borrowers eligible for relief to resume their student debt payments while the courts consider the lawsuit. For that reason, the Secretary of Education is extending the pause on student loan payments while we seek relief from the courts, but no later than June 30, 2023, which would give the Supreme Court an opportunity to hear the case in its current term. Payments will resume 60 days after the pause ends. I'm never going to apologize for helping working class and middle class families recover from the economic crisis created by the pandemic. And I'll continue working to make government work to deliver for all Americans, This is important.
So Biden saying there that he stands by his rationale, that what he's doing is legal. Now that something that some legal observers don't agree with. Even some people, I think, who would like this plan to go forward have concerns about the HEROES Act justification, which is tied to a kind of a pandemic, the ability of the president to suspend payments during an emergency. They're saying, well, the COVID pandemic is an emergency, but in so many other contexts, we're now saying that's over with. So we'll see.
Robby, I think he's on shaky legal ground. I'm not a lawyer, but at the same time, Biden himself said the pandemic was over and then had to backtrack because of that legal rationale. Listen, this is like deja vu again. Biden has been pushing this back, but this was not passed by Congress, explicitly anyway. I know they're making a legal argument that ties to past legislation. But I think it's on shaky ground. And remember, where will this likely end up? Supreme Court. And who's got the edge there? Well, conservatives.
I mean, in the meantime, continuing to pause repayments for some people is probably an even greater relief than the plan that he did, which is not a the plan is not to forgive all student loan debt. It's to do $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000, depending on what you qualify for, what your income level is, et cetera. Some people owe far more than that, and having had this pause now several times actually continues to probably offer them more relief than if that resumes and you have more debt than is actually going to get forgiven, you might end up being more angry with.
Well, no, that's right. I mean, this is not going to last forever. We're going to get a verdict one way or the other, and people who have been used to not paying or perhaps have to pay again, and that could be a problem. Now, Biden politically, at that point, I imagine is going to be seeking a second term. He hasn't fully decided that, but I'm sure he'll blame his detractors if that happens. But it's going to be a real disappointment for a lot of people.
He can find a new justification, forgive all of it right before the 2024 election.
Exactly.
Then win and have the Supreme Court put the hold on that one too.
Well, and he might then call on Congress to pass it, and then blame Republicans for not passing it, because obviously the House is not going to pass it with its new narrow Republican majority next year.
Absolutely. Well, the Republican nominee for Attorney General in Arizona and the Republican National Committee have filed a lawsuit over the 2022 midterms. Now, according to the filing, mismanagement by election officials may have influenced the race. It's important to note they're not alleging any fraud, manipulation, or intentional wrongdoing. But this race between the Democratic and Republican candidates, 500 votes. This is a statewide race that is so close. And so I think it's not surprising that the Republican side, which is only 500 votes behind, is going to want to file some motion to have things recalculated.
If it was flipped, maybe Democrats would be doing the same thing. This is not Kari Lake claims. As you mentioned, they want to make sure the count is right. And I think this is fine. It's their right to file a lawsuit and the recount, and let's see it. But this is not the same as Trump saying, hey, this is totally illegitimate, or Kari Lake saying, listen, I should have won, and I'm not going to concede defeat. But it's amazing how some of these races are still close. I mean, they're still pending House races. I mean, it's just amazing that we're waiting this long. But that's a remarkable thing. And Arizona was the focus of the election deniers, and they didn't do well.
Right. And there were issues in Maricopa County this time around. There were issues that were widely reported on, so it's not...
No, and it's people are saying it won't affect the outcome, but okay, well, let's thoroughly investigate that. I think that's totally fine. Yeah,
it needs to be, because if people are going to have faith in the outcome, they have to have faith that it was all done properly.
And I think it's good for the plaintiffs to have said what they said in their legal filings. We're not alleging widespread fraud.
Right.
Very important.
Smart. All right. Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Robby.
Happy Thanksgiving, and we'll talk to you all later.